Yeah.
So let's focus on undergrad a bit.
Yeah.
Did you find that many of your courses gave you some like pragmatic content that you are happy that you learned about and that has improved your life? Or how do you think about the content that you're exposed to in your undergrad? And let's talk about what you did in undergrad.
Yeah. So I did a Bachelor of Science. I ended up doing an honors thesis in my fourth year, which we'll chat about. And then my major was microbiology for that. Um, I don't want to offend anybody or be rude or anything, but
Sure.
we'll try and keep it candid.
Totally.
In that I found that there was a lot of content, and I don't know if this is specific to biology and biological sciences, because when we were going through the programs, people would kind of joke about it that biology was all memorization and regurgitation on tests, and then you kind of forget everything afterwards. And to a point, there's some truth in that. In that, I found that especially for biology, to really get the mid 90s, top 90s on your scores, you kind of had to know the whole chapter in and out, because any little detail that could come up, it was you had to have known that bacteria name, or you had to have known that process or something. There was a lot less kind of applied knowledge to it. I started to encounter that in a couple courses in my third and fourth year, where you would have to know the content, but then they would give it to you in the test, and you'd have to work with new information and actually think. You know what I mean? It wasn't just brute memorization and regurgitation anymore. It kind of forced you to look at it. You have new information, you need to synthesize that, work with it, and then come to a new solution from that. And as I mentioned, this could have been specific to my minor or my major rather, that it was very memorization heavy, but I found for myself, oftentimes that would lead up to near the end of my degree. It wasn't so much cramming, but it would be studying 2 weeks before the exam, learning things to, as you mentioned, a ridiculous level that the law of diminishing returns is totally there, that, you've put in an extra 5, 6, 7 hours to get maybe 1 or 2% extra on there, but didn't change things at the time. You write the test, you do well on it, you knew everything on there, and then ask me that stuff in 6 months' time. And most of it I didn't retain because I wasn't applying it. I didn't really have a use for it in my day-to-day life there. And if you're not kind of using and synthesizing and working with that information, you don't really remember it. Whereas I mentioned the honors thesis there. The reason that I never thought I really wanted to get involved in research, but I bumped into an instructor in my third year who created tests in that format that forced you to really think, take that new knowledge, synthesize it, and work with it. And I wasn't used to that. I did substantially lower on those exams than, not substantially, but I did lower on those exams than the ones that were just brute memorization, because it was kind of a new way of thinking for myself at that point. And ultimately, I approached that instructor to get involved in their lab, because that was somebody that I saw that I wanted mentorship from. I think I got denied 3 or 4 times before ultimately my persistence kind of got my foot in the door there. But
Yeah.
that year, under that mentorship of the people in that lab, of that kind of benchtop research, and then with that instructor, were kind of invaluable. And that was hands down the best learning in my undergraduate degree. And it's kind of crazy just how much more I got out of that 1 year with those people than I did kind of the preceding 3 years in the classrooms.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that. I found something similar. As you know, I went to college initially and did a tech program called power engineering. Then I worked for a little while. Then I went back and did an undergrad. So coming in a bit older, I was more focused on, trying to find information and knowledge that I genuinely cared about, that I thought could be useful. Um, and I had my eyes open for that, for the majority of my coursework. It was maybe a few classes I slacked on, but for the most part, like I was really scouring to try to find some useful stuff. And I found most courses in undergrad, tell me if you agree with this, probably about 80% of it is fluff and things that are hard to apply. Whereas 20% of it, if you really grab those models and understand them well, you can like use them in your worldview almost. It's like they're useful, you know, there's something to them that you can actually start noticing in the world around you. And so when I found that, I was very, you know, excited. That's, I guess, the point of undergrad. To your point, though, working in the research labs was useful for me, and just seeing, I guess, the academic game, I would always think of it at work. But there was also some aspects of the research game and the academic grind, you know, working as a research assistant under the, you know, research supervisor who's under the PhD, who's under that tenured professor. And there were some parts of that I really disliked, but it was awesome getting like some real responsibility there for sure. But I found definitely the most valuable things that came out of my undergraduate was, like you mentioned, the synthesizing and actual thinking of information that I then had to like put in writing. Like definitely my big writing projects were the most valuable for me, because it's like feels real, you know, when you really like track down, I guess it would be, yeah, you track down the evidence for your argument and you lay it out in a concise and hopefully convincing way. And that, yeah, that exercise has really like sharpened my thinking on a lot of topics.
Totally.
Yeah,
And
man.
you know what? Like, if you were to kind of like go through a list of skills that like I can definitely say that on the other end of my degree, like improved, you know, tenfold or whatever it is, like writing was definitely up there for me, that I became like a way stronger writer, like by the end of my degree than I did going into it, even though I didn't really take any English classes. Like it was mostly through report writing and so forth. And exactly as you kind of like alluded to with, research and finding papers that back up your argument and then synthesizing that argument and so forth, that was a skill that has like definitely paid dividends. That, you know, if you were to kind of like look at it and say like, out of, you know, the amount of money you spent for your undergraduate degree, was it worth it to develop these skills? Like that alone probably was. That like I could have used those skills like in a lot of different career paths. It's not like unique to the skill or like the I guess career that I took with it. But I don't know if that was like a universal skill that everybody develops. It would be kind of interesting to see like a list of what people find the most useful skills are that they pulled out of like an undergraduate degree.
Totally. And I think with writing, probably undergrad in general, I've found that you get out of it what you put into it. You know,
Totally.
like if you put in tons and tons of effort into learning how to write and research, you'll get out tons and tons of value. If you wait till
Totally.
the last minute, you'll not get really much value. Um, yeah, it's interesting you say that, though, thinking about, okay, well, I spent this amount of time and money and opportunity cost on undergraduate. Was it worth it in hindsight? And for me, it's been interesting. It's like oftentimes I felt like no in boring classes, but all it takes is, or it took like one or two classes that changed the way I think for me to be like, yeah, actually, like, you know, the whatever tuition is 50K or whatever by the end of it was probably all worth it just to like get a deep understanding of this one topic.
That's, yeah, like such an interesting concept. I have like kind of wrestled with that back and forth. And the more I think about it, like for me, I always viewed my undergraduate as a stepping stone. Like I knew I wanted to go to medical school afterwards. So for me, it was like, this is a stepping stone towards that goal. Um, but if I was in a situation where I didn't know what kind of career path I wanted to seek out, and I was like unsure of what I wanted to do, knowing what I know now, I definitely wouldn't be going to university to like do an arts degree or something in the meantime to like try and figure it out. I think I probably would have taken the year to just do a ton of shadowing, like, you know what I mean? Find a profession that interests me, get on the phone with some people. Hey, can I follow you around? And just kind of like getting exposure to like different careers like in that. I think that would have been a lot more like valuable to
Yeah.
me. And then using that time to do other things like in developing other skills that I think that's maybe what university does kind of provide is like a bit of a schedule and some responsibilities that for a younger person like myself, I don't know if I would have necessarily had the discipline to like work on skills on my own schedule, and like be productive on my own schedule. That, by having these essay deadlines and so forth, that does kind of provide that structure that you need. And at least I shouldn't say that you need, but that I needed. So yeah, it's very interesting.